The dimensional breach. The massive viewing screen in the Coalition Command Center flickered with static before revealing the face of Ambassador Zektar. His scaled features twisted into an expression of barely contained fury as he stared at the human delegation seated across the negotiation table. The air in the chamber felt heavy with tension, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her glasses and met the alien ambassador's glare with calm determination. Behind her, Commander Jake Morrison stood with military precision, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. The other human representatives remained silent, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether their species lived or died. Zektar's voice echoed through the chamber with the authority of someone who had never been denied. His words carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds and the confidence of a species that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. The Coalition had built their empire on the foundation that no single race could challenge their technological supremacy, and they intended to keep it that way. The discovery of humanity's secret project had sent shockwaves through the Coalition's highest levels. For months, their spies had reported strange energy readings from human colonies. At first, they dismissed these as primitive experiments with fusion technology. The Coalition had seen countless species attempt to reach for power beyond their grasp, only to destroy themselves in the process. But the readings had grown stronger, more complex, more organized. What started as scattered anomalies had become a network spanning dozens of star systems. The Coalition's scientists struggled to understand the patterns they were seeing. The energy signatures defied everything they knew about physics, bending space and time in ways that should have been impossible. Elena remembered the day they first achieved stable dimensional manipulation. She had been working in her laboratory on Luna Station, surrounded by equations that most human scientists couldn't even pronounce. The breakthrough came not from brute force calculations, but from understanding that reality itself was more flexible than anyone had imagined. Where alien species tried to force their will upon the universe, humans learned to work with it, to find the hidden paths that connected all things. The technology had evolved rapidly after that first success. Human engineers, freed from conventional thinking, had created machines that could fold space like origami. They built gateways that connected distant worlds in the blink of an eye, and weapons that could strike targets that existed in different dimensions entirely. Most importantly, they had learned to do all of this while remaining completely invisible to the Coalition sensors. Zektar leaned forward, his claws scraping against the metal table. His species, the hegemony, had dominated galactic politics for over 3,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed entire civilizations, and reduced proud warrior races to footnotes in history books. The idea that a young species like humanity could pose any real threat seemed laughable to him. The Coalition's military might was legendary throughout the galaxy. Their fleets numbered in the hundreds of thousands, each ship equipped with weapons capable of cracking planets in half. Their soldiers were enhanced with biotechnology that made them faster, stronger, and more resilient than any natural organism. Their defensive systems could withstand the combined firepower of entire star systems. Commander Morrison had studied every aspect of Coalition military doctrine during his years at the Terra Military Academy. He knew their strengths, their tactics, and most importantly, their weaknesses. The Coalition fought like generals from ancient Earth, using overwhelming force and traditional strategies that had worked for millennia. They had become predictable in their success, relying on raw power instead of innovation. Elena's team had spent years developing countermeasures to Coalition technology. They studied captured alien artifacts, analyzed energy signatures from distant battles, and reverse-engineered everything they could get their hands on. What they discovered was that the Coalition's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also rigid, locked into patterns that couldn't adapt to truly revolutionary approaches. The human colonies in the Outer Rim had served as testing grounds for the new technology. Families volunteered to relocate to experimental settlements, knowing they might be risking their lives for the future of their species. These brave pioneers became the first to live in cities that existed partially outside normal spacetime, protected by barriers that could deflect attacks from any known weapon. As Zektar continued his threats, Alina thought about those families, about the children playing in parks that existed in pocket dimensions, about the farmers growing crops in soil that drew nutrients from multiple realities simultaneously. They had built something beautiful and impossible, and she would not let the Coalition destroy it. The ambassador's ultimatum was simple and brutal. Humanity had 24 hours to surrender all dimensional technology and submit to Coalition oversight. Any resistance would result in the complete annihilation of human civilization. Zektar spoke these words with the casual confidence of someone ordering dinner, as if the extinction of an entire species was merely a bureaucratic inconvenience. Morrison stepped forward, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. He informed the ambassador that humanity respectfully declined their ultimatum. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before gods, impossible and defiant. Zektar's reaction was exactly what Alina had predicted. The alien ambassador laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the chamber. He couldn't believe that these primitive creatures would dare to refuse the Coalition's mercy. In his mind, humanity was already dead. They just hadn't realized it yet. The Coalition fleet began moving within hours of the failed negotiations. Admiral Crix commanded the largest armada ever assembled for a punitive expedition. Over 50,000 warships of various classes formed a moving wall of destruction as it advanced toward human space. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could reduce continents to ash, and their combined firepower could sterilize entire solar systems. Alina watched the approaching fleet from the command center on Earth's moon. The dimensional scanners showed the Coalition forces as bright dots moving through space with mechanical precision. To most observers, it would have looked like certain doom approaching. But Alina saw something else entirely. She saw an enemy that had become too comfortable with victory, too used to fighting opponents who played by the same rules they did. The first Coalition attacks targeted humanity's outer colonies with devastating effectiveness. Plasma bombardments turned thriving cities into molten craters, and particle beams sliced through defensive installations like they were made of paper. The aliens expected panic, surrender, or desperate counterattacks using conventional weapons. What they got instead was silence. The human colonies seemed to simply vanish as the attacks reached them. Ships would fire upon populated worlds only to find empty space where cities had been moments before. At first, the Coalition assumed their weapons were working perfectly, completely vaporizing everything they struck. But their sensors detected no debris, no radiation signatures, nothing to indicate that anything had ever existed there at all. Morrison smiled as he watched the confusion spreading through the Coalition ranks. The dimensional anchors were working exactly as designed, shifting entire colonies into parallel dimensions at the moment of attack. The aliens were fighting an enemy that could literally step outside of reality whenever threatened. The first human counterattack came without warning. Coalition ships began reporting strange malfunctions as invisible forces struck their hulls. Weapons systems failed, engines shut down, and entire sections of starships seemed to phase out of existence. The attacks came from impossible angles, as if the humans were firing from directions that didn't exist in normal space. Admiral Crix demanded explanations from his science officers, but they had no answers to give. The human weapons seemed to ignore shields, armor, and even the basic laws of physics. Ships that should have been safe behind massive defensive barriers found themselves under attack from weapons that materialized inside their own hulls. Alina's masterpiece was finally revealing itself to the galaxy. The dimensional manipulation technology didn't just allow humans to hide or transport objects through space. It gave them the ability to attack from alternate realities, to strike at enemies who couldn't even perceive the dimensions from which the attacks were coming. As the Coalition fleet continued its advance, more and more ships fell victim to the impossible human weapons. Panic began to spread through the ranks as soldiers realized they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't defend against. The greatest military force in galactic history was being systematically dismantled by creatures they had dismissed as primitive savages. Zektar watched the battle reports with growing horror. Everything he thought he knew about warfare, about technology, about the natural order of the galaxy, was being proven wrong. Humanity hadn't just developed new weapons. They had fundamentally changed the rules of the game itself. The dimensional breach had been opened, and there was no closing it now. The reality storm. The space around the Coalition fleet began to ripple like water as Elena initiated the next phase of humanity's response. From her command station, she watched as reality itself became a weapon in the hands of her species. The dimensional anchors that had been quietly installed throughout the galaxy over the past decade were now revealing their true purpose. Admiral Crix found himself trapped in a nightmare that defied everything he understood about warfare. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, shuddered as weapons fire materialized inside its heavily armored hull. The particle beams came from directions that his sensors insisted were empty space, striking critical systems with surgical precision that no random attack could achieve. Commander Morrison coordinated the human response from multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. His consciousness, enhanced by quantum neural interfaces, existed in several realities at once. This allowed him to see the battle from perspectives that no alien mind could comprehend. He watched coalition formations that looked impenetrable from normal space reveal fatal weaknesses when viewed from alternate dimensions. The first coalition cruiser to be completely enveloped by a dimensional pocket disappeared from normal space with a flash of violet light. Its crew found themselves trapped in a reality where the laws of physics operated according to human design. Their weapons wouldn't fire, their engines wouldn't respond, and their communications equipment could only receive broadcasts from Earth asking for their surrender. Elena had spent years perfecting these dimensional prisons. They weren't designed to kill, but to neutralize threats by removing them from the battlefield entirely. Each pocket reality was a masterwork of quantum engineering, a self-contained universe where humans controlled every fundamental force. The trapped aliens could live comfortably, but they could never again threaten anyone. Zektar's communications with Admiral Crix became increasingly desperate as more coalition ships vanished from the battlefield. The ambassador's arrogance had transformed into panic as he realized that his species was facing something completely beyond their experience. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were rewriting the very nature of warfare itself. The Coalition's quantum shields, their most advanced defensive technology, proved useless against attacks that originated from outside normal spacetime. Weapons that fired from parallel dimensions simply bypassed these shields entirely, as if they didn't exist. The aliens' most trusted defensive systems became nothing more than elaborate decorations in the face of humanity's revolutionary approach to combat. Dr. Vasquez felt a mixture of pride and sadness as she watched the Coalition fleet struggle against forces they couldn't understand. She had hoped that the demonstration of human capabilities would be enough to prevent bloodshed. Instead, the aliens' refusal to acknowledge their mistake had forced humanity to reveal the full extent of their technological revolution. The human ships that finally revealed themselves to Coalition sensors appeared to be violating every law of physics simultaneously. They moved through space in ways that suggested they weren't entirely present in normal reality. When Coalition forces fired upon them, the weapons passed harmlessly through hulls that seemed solid but weren't actually there in any conventional sense. Morrison's tactical genius became apparent as the battle progressed. He had positioned human forces not just in three-dimensional space, but across multiple dimensional planes. This gave him the ability to attack from literally infinite angles while keeping his own ships safe from retaliation. The Coalition found themselves fighting an enemy that could be everywhere and nowhere at once. The breakthrough moment came when Elena succeeded in creating a stable reality storm around the Coalition's command vessel. The space surrounding Admiral Crix's flagship began to twist and fold, creating a maze of intersecting dimensions that trapped the massive warship in a prison of its own making. The Admiral could see his destination clearly, but every path toward it led deeper into the labyrinth. Coalition reinforcements arrived to find their comrades trapped in impossible geometries that hurt to look at. Ships that tried to enter the affected area found themselves scattered across multiple realities, their crews divided between dimensions where they couldn't communicate or coordinate with each other. The human ability to manipulate space-time had transformed the battlefield into something that resembled abstract art more than a war zone. Zektar's final communication to his home world was a broken admission of complete defeat. The proud ambassador who had dismissed humanity as a minor threat now begged his superiors to consider immediate surrender before the humans decided to extend their reality-bending warfare to Coalition core worlds. His words carried the weight of someone who had witnessed the birth of a new age in galactic politics. The Coalition's attempt at a final gambit involved bringing their most powerful dreadnoughts out of reserve. These massive vessels, each the size of a small moon, represented thousands of years of military engineering. They mounted weapons capable of destroying stars and carried enough firepower to conquer entire sectors. Their arrival should have turned the tide of battle in the Coalition's favor. Instead, Alina demonstrated that size and raw power meant nothing when faced with the ability to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. The dreadnoughts found themselves experiencing time at different rates, with some sections of their hulls aging centuries in seconds, while others remained frozen in temporal stasis. Their massive weapons became useless as they fired at targets that existed in different time streams. Morrison's coup de grace was the creation of a dimensional feedback loop that connected all the Coalition ships in the area. Every weapon they fired at human forces was redirected to strike other Coalition vessels. The aliens found themselves destroying their own fleet, while human ships watched safely from alternate realities. It was a demonstration of tactical brilliance that would be studied for generations. The moment of truth came when Alina opened a direct communication channel to every ship in the Coalition fleet simultaneously. Her image appeared on thousands of screens as she addressed the alien forces in their own languages. She spoke not as a conqueror, but as someone offering a path forward that didn't involve mutual destruction. Alina's offer was simple and unprecedented. Humanity would end the battle immediately if the Coalition acknowledged their sovereignty and withdrew from human space. There would be no demands for tribute, no occupation of alien worlds, no humiliation of defeated enemies. The humans asked only for recognition and respect, the same things the Coalition had denied them at the beginning of this conflict. The response from Admiral Crix came after hours of consultation with his remaining officers. The proud military commander who had expected an easy victory against primitive humans now found himself in the position of accepting terms from an enemy he couldn't hope to defeat. His surrender was broadcast across the galaxy, marking the end of Coalition dominance and the beginning of humanity's emergence as a major power. Zektar's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire conflict. The ambassador who had threatened humanity with extinction now found himself serving as an intermediary between his people and the species he had so thoroughly underestimated. His reports to the Coalition Council carried a new tone of respect and even admiration for human achievements. The aftermath of the battle saw Coalition scientists desperately trying to understand how humanity had achieved such impossible technological breakthroughs. Alina, in a gesture of goodwill that surprised many, offered to share some of the basic principles behind dimensional manipulation. Her condition was that this knowledge be used only for peaceful purposes and never again to threaten other species. Commander Morrison oversaw the gradual return of Coalition forces to their own territory. The human approach to victory was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of occupying conquered worlds or demanding reparations, humanity simply asked that their former enemies spread the word that Earth was no longer available for conquest or intimidation. The dimensional prisons holding Coalition ships were opened one by one, releasing crews who returned to their fleets with stories that seemed impossible to believe. They spoke of realities where humans controlled gravity, time, and space itself. These accounts spread throughout the galaxy, establishing humanity's reputation as a species capable of miracles. Alina stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching as the last coalition ships disappeared into hyperspace. The war was over, but she knew that humanity's real journey was just beginning. They had proven themselves capable of defending their independence, but now they needed to decide what kind of galactic citizens they wanted to become. The quantum architects had reshaped more than just the battlefield. They had rewritten the rules of galactic civilization itself, proving that innovation and determination could triumph over tradition and overwhelming force. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and the universe would never be the same.